But that right there is what makes this game just an absolute 10 for me. Despite the beautifully illustrated player boards and the vast amount of space that Canopy Evergreen takes up, at its heart, it's essentially a card drafting game for 2 to 4 players. Over the course of 3 seasons, or rounds as I like to call them, players will be drafting cards to grow a forest, attract wildlife into their ecosystem, and to collect the perfect weather patterns to grow plants and trees, all in the name of gaining points. And the player with the most points after 3 rounds is the winner. But just look at her, isn't she pretty? She just, not only does she have beauty, she also has brains, or I don't know. It has a very interesting drafting mechanic, and it's actually, spoiler alert, why I love this game so much. So let's go over exactly how the drafting works. There's only one other game I can think of that has a similar aspect, and it's designed by, it's like a pirate themed game. I can't think of the name of it off. It's Sea of Clouds. The game's called Sea of Clouds. It's over there. Each player will have a stack of cards between them and the player to their left, and a stack between them and the player to their right. There will also be a communal stack in the center of the table. So during the player's turn, they will choose one of those stacks of cards to add to their tableau. But it's not that simple. The player must start with the stack to the left. So they secretly look at the card or cards there and decide if they want them. They can simply take that card or cards and add it to their tableau. In this case, it was a cattail moss, which is a great card because you get 5 points for every 2 of them that you have. Fair enough. But let's say that that just isn't enough. So I choose to place that card back down and go to the next pile. So I would then add a card to that pile I passed on without looking at it, and then I would proceed to look at the next pile's card. Ooh, this one has some juicy rain, which is good because you will gain points for each combination of rain and sunshine that a player has in their tableau at the end of each round. So this could possibly be worth up to 8 points, but maybe I'm greedy and these just aren't enough. So I would set those cards down and then I would add another card to that stack, making these stacks more juicy for the next player. But now I will go to the third stack and take a peek in there. Oh, it's a huckleberry. Now this card will give you food, and food is important because at the beginning of a player's turn, they can attract wildlife into their ecosystem. And the wildlife comes in 3 different flavors. There are some foraging animals, which will give the players points at the end of each round. There's also animals that just give you 2 points at the end of the game. But there's also animals that will give you ongoing abilities. This river otter will give you 1 victory point for every 3 rain tokens that you have. This rough-skinned newt will simply give you 2 points at the end of the game. And this mountain beaver, when you draw from the seed deck, you may keep an additional card. That is a special deck of cards that is set beside at the beginning during setup because there are pinecone cards that allow players to take extra cards at the end of the round. And as you can see from here, I didn't actually set that part up. I forgot about that. But you draw 4 cards per player, so in a 3-player game, there'll be 12 cards on this deck, and they go underneath this little seed token here like so. Maybe I'll edit that out. Maybe I'll keep it. I don't know, just see how you feel during editing. And yes, these 3 animals here that I used for this example, I simply chose them as the example because I felt that they had the funniest names of all of the animals in the deck. Who doesn't love a river otter, a rough-skinned newt, and my personal favorite, mountain beaver? And at the beginning of the game during setup, each player would have received a wildlife card, or as I like to call it, their spirit animal for the game. And in this case, I got the asshole bumblebee. And each one of these cards has a token that you can place on one of the stacks of cards during gameplay, and they will have special effects. For instance, my asshole bumblebee here, whenever a player chooses the stack that I set my bumblebee on, I can discard a food to steal one of those cards right from underneath them. That's why I call him the asshole bumblebee. There's also a jerk fox that you can put on a pile. And when the jerk fox is on there, it's not actually called the jerk fox, but when the jerk fox is on there, other players are not allowed to look at that stack. They can just blindly choose to take it. Now, all of these cards aren't necessarily good. There are things such as wildfires and diseases, and they are quite interesting in the way they work because wildfires, for instance, if you have one of them, no big deal, nothing happens. If you have 2 of them, you have to discard 2 cards from your tableau at the end of the round. Now, if you have 3 wildfires, it gets even better. Now, instead of you having to discard 2 cards, every player at the table has to discard 1 card, which is an interesting design choice because now you go from, well, I don't want to get another wildfire to, if you get 2 wildfires, you're like, screw it. Let's let that fire spread so that way I can share the joy. I lose 1 less card and now everyone else loses a card. Aren't wildfires great? No, too soon. Too soon. It's not the time, Eric. But when choosing from these 3 options, the players can never go back. So once you looked at a pile and you've decided that it just wasn't juicy enough for you and you added a card and moved on to the next stack, you can't go back to that stack. Of course, there is an animal that will allow you to go back and take it. So let's take a closer look at a couple of the cards. The root/trunk card will allow players to add new trunks to their board. It will also allow them to add trunk pieces to existing roots. And there's no limit to how tall these can get. You actually want to get them pretty tall because at the end of a round, a player with the tallest tree will score points. But in addition to this, there are canopy cards, and those are how you can top off these trees and score victory points for them. And not only that, but they look cool when you have them on your board. And when you complete trees on either side of one of these tokens, you get to add one of those tokens to your tableau, giving you an additional symbol for scoring points at the end of the round. The weather card will gain you a point for each set of sun and rain that you have, and the player with the most sets will also gain 5 additional points, and the player with the second most sets will gain 2 additional points. There are some cards that are your standard card game affair, like collecting multiple sets of salmon will gain you 1, 3, 5, 9, 13 points respectively. Same thing here with Trillium, but this one's a little more risky because if you only get 1, you get burned and lose 2 points. And then the cattail moss get 5 points for every 2 that you get. And the huckleberries gain you food depending on how many you have. And food is handy because it helps you attract wildlife. The pine cones are dope because that allows you to draw extra cards from the seed deck at the end of the round. So once I would choose my cards, then play would pass to the player to my left, and they would do the same thing. If you notice, that central pile will likely grow faster than the other decks. But what's also interesting is the player to my left, their last stack that they get and look at is the first stack that I look at. So there's kind of like, I don't want to say a bluffing mechanism, but you can kind of bluff during this game, and it's kind of fun too. When people start table talking during play and they're like, ooh, that's pretty juicy, I don't know. It's not quite there yet. And then they pass on a pile, and then you think, oh, maybe that pile is pretty dope. And then you get to it, and it ends up sucking so bad, and you just kind of give them a dirty look. But play continues like that around the table until one player simply has no options in front of them. And once that happens, it triggers the end of a season's scoring. First thing that happens is players look and see if they have any pine cones. That allows them to get extra cards at the end from this deck. The next thing that happens is they resolve any of the threats. You would check any of your foraging wildlife cards, check to see who has the tallest tree. And the player with the tallest tree will gain points. Players will gain points for their weather cards that they collected, which is 1 point per pair of sun and rain. And the player with the most weather sets will gain additional points. And then players will score points for their collected plants and mushrooms. And then once players have scored their tableaus, all of the cards minus the animal cards will just get collected and reshuffled, and you rinse and repeat a total of 3 times. And after you finish the 3rd round scoring, players will score additional points for having sets or families of wildlife. So if you have 2 matching wildlife, you'll gain 2 additional points. But if you have all 3 of the same wildlife type, those will gain you 5 points. And all the wildlife cards have these symbols on the bottom, and if you're able to match those into a chain, you'll also gain additional points for that too. So there is power in trying to match some of these symbols on the bottom of the wildlife cards to create like an efficient ecosystem, I guess thematically is what we're doing, or something like that. What happened to my voice? But that is Canopy Evergreen in a nutshell. I really enjoy this game a lot, like a lot. And this is going to be an overly positive review, so let's go over a few things that I think kind of suck. The card quality, it doesn't suck. It's just very average, but I feel the game is way beyond average, so I kind of would like to have maybe seen a linen finish or something on the cards. I don't know, that's kind of nitpicky, but I like what I like. Some say that finish on cards will cause the cards to not last as long. I don't know if that's true, because it's not actually like the stock, I don't think, that is made that way. It's after the print, the paper receives like a stamp that makes an impression of that texture on them. So I could see that could compromise the integrity of the card. So maybe it's best that they aren't that way, but the boards, while they do look cool, it is sometimes hard to see exactly how tall a tree is when you're scoping out other players' boards to see, you know, if you're gonna get the tallest tree or not, or if you need to build up your tree or this, that, the other thing. And the terminology of the trees. The pieces, the very bottom piece they refer to as the root, and then the other pieces are the trunks and the canopies are the top. And I know that terminology is fine and probably correct. The only thing is everyone that I've played this game with, there's always this issue. Somebody goes, give me a trunk. And then you hand them the middle section and they're like, no, I want a trunk. And you're like, what, oh, you mean the roots? And they're like, yeah, whatever. The base, the roots. Aren't the roots supposed to be underground? And you're like, yeah, but that's what they call them in this game. Blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's a minor gripe, but it's just kind of a terminology thing that gets kind of awkward. So most players end up going, give me the bottom or the middle or the top. But maybe we're just stupid. I don't know. And speaking of us being stupid, another issue is sometimes players forget to add a card to the pile that they just looked at. So it's best if one player kind of maybe polices this aspect of the game and make sure that they put a card on each stack. But those are all just kind of really nitpicky things, because I feel like I should say something negative about it rather than just praising it the entire time. But here comes the praise part. This game is so much fun. I absolutely love the drafting mechanism in this game. The way that works, it's kind of a pusher-like thing. You know, you're going along, you're like, oh, that stack's okay. Ooh, this stack is pretty good. But maybe there could be more. Maybe I could put one of my animal tokens on there and make it less desirable maybe for other players, so that way they'll build it up. And then when it gets back around to me, it'll be even better. But that right there is what makes this game just an absolute 10 for me. I just love that drafting mechanism. Obviously, the art is amazing. It's Vincent Dutrait. Apparently, that guy never stops working or drawing or creating art. He's just constantly creating fabulous art. I'm sure he's doing it right now as we speak. And the table presence is pretty cool in this game too. You have all these beautifully illustrated cards displayed in front of each player. You got your little trees growing there. And the game comes with these kind of bizarre-ish tuck boxes, which I thought were stupid at first. And then I started using them and realized how handy they are and how much they accelerate the setup and teardown of the game. It really helps the whole process of that. So I've since become a big fan of these origami tuck boxes that store everything, and they fit perfectly back in the box. I would like to pause for just a moment and mention that this is a review copy that was provided by the publisher. However, all the thoughts and opinions of this game are my own. And if you find any value or entertainment in my content, please consider clicking that subscribe button and that notification bell. And leave a comment down below, because that is the trifecta that YouTube requires for you to have any success on their platform. And Harley Dog here gets a pepperoni for every new subscriber. And while this game isn't necessarily, I don't want to say it's heavy, because it's certainly not. I would say middleweight at best, maybe. It isn't. I haven't found it to be the easiest teach. It's not a difficult teach, because teaching of the drafting mechanism, the core of the game, is easy. It's just knowing exactly how every single card works could be a little challenging for some players. I know some of them, you know, seem quite obvious and elementary to us who have been playing games for a while, but to some people maybe who aren't as familiar with these types of games, they may be like, well, what's this one with the -2? Well, while it seems kind of simple, it's not. I wouldn't quite describe it as a gateway game, but all the cards are pretty balanced, and I really love the way they balance the threats, because the way it maths out with all the different player counts, if everyone takes a threat, then all is well, and nobody will get penalized for it. However, if one person does get 2 of them and they have to lose cards, the rest of the table might now be more accepting of the threats, knowing that that will hopefully keep the player who has 2 threats from getting a 3rd threat and the threat spreading throughout the table, which it can kind of create an interesting tension now, especially if a player sees that 3rd or 4th threat or however many threats is in the middle stack that all players have access to. It's kind of a game changer. And situations like that are kind of where a bluffing almost comes into play. It's not like a mandatory bluffing or like a poker type bluffing, but there can be a little bit of table talk with players looking at stacks and be like, ooh, that's, I don't know, that's juicy. That might be a good one for you, but it's not good enough for me just yet. And then they'll put a card on it and just kind of be silly like that. Also though, with the feeling and and energy around the table, sometimes there's these explosions of emotions when a player chooses one of those stacks and they lay the cards out and you're like, oh man, you know, I could have had that cattail moss and I can't believe the other card I put on it was another cattail moss. I just let you get easy 5 points. Or when that player reveals their third threat, or when a player reveals their first threat, keeping the other player from getting a third threat, or when a player reveals a Canopy card, topping off their 14 stack high tree that they've been building the whole game for 28 points in a game where like a winning score is probably about 110, 120. So that's a pretty big chunk. But all of that is just kind of one layer of this onion of a game. That's just the cards that you're drafting. There's also the animal cards. And the animal cards are pretty cool because you can also gain extra in-game points with matching up their symbols in the bottom, creating like a ecosystem chain or whatnot. Also, collecting matching ones gives you extra points. Some of them will give you points for foraging between rounds, such as, you know, X amount of points for having this many of this type of symbol. But some of the most interesting of those animals, though, are the animals that have the special powers, because the special powers are pretty neat. They'll do things as, you know, keeping players from being able to look at them, or being able to pay food to steal cards, or maybe that player will just have to lose a food and you gain extra food for the cards. Or there's an elk, I think it is, that allows you to look at the top 6 cards of the deck, name a card type, go through them, and if that card type's in there, you get it. The newt allows you to not discard a card when you have to discard a card from a threat. There's just so many different interesting abilities from these animals. And by the end of the game, players might have, you know, several of those animals that they're using each round, kind of manipulating the whole game in a very interesting way. And should all that not be enough for you, there is the event deck, which you can shuffle up and flip over a new event each round. And those give interesting little twists to the game. Nothing too big, but stuff like instead of gaining points for having tallest tree, you get to take one of the tokens off your board. I believe that was one of them. But it's just kind of a neat twist for after you've played the game several times. Add those in just to spice it up a little bit. While this game does have plenty of replayability, and I absolutely love it, the idea of an expansion, that would be so sweet, because I want more of it because it's so good. But this game totally checks all my boxes. It's pretty interesting drafting mechanism. It plays in about 90 minutes maybe. This game is getting a 5 out of 5, which earns it a Beard Stroke of Excellence. This game is just, you know, my criteria has become for a game to get a perfect 5 out of 5 from me. There's really no such thing as a perfect game. However, after I play a game enough times to review it, and I still have an extreme desire to keep playing it, even though I don't have to, over hundreds or thousands of other games that I have that I could be playing, if I choose to play that game at game night, that really says something. That is one heck of a game. And this game is one of those games that's getting a 5 out of 5, a perfect score. I absolutely love it. And that is Canopy Evergreen. As always, thanks for watching.